This is the first time I've ever been able to.
Do it, do it.
Do it.
Do it. Oh!
I wasn't with enough
I missed
authority.
No wonder. There you go.
Alright, I'll apologize in advance for any errors I make tonight. We'll call to order, so we'll start with the roll call. Mayor Ray Santos,
Here.
Councilmember Mike Laura,
Here.
and, I'm sorry, Pro Tem Mayor,
That's all right, no worries.
Economic Development Director Kyle Rosinski, I'm here. Member Munir Ahmed,
Yeah.
Member Bernie Milan,
Here.
Member Evan Brown here, Member Betty Rader,
Here.
Member Von Lawson,
Present.
Member Karen Wheat,
Present.
BUSD student Angelina Segovia,
Present.
and we're missing some, no.
And then Todd should have been on the list as well. I guess he got removed,
Yeah.
but not officially. Just removed his name didn't make it on the agenda.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
But Christina Taylor will be here on behalf of. Are you not on there either?
No.
Sweet.
I thought, oh, should I leave?
Hey, I sent it over. I can't make.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Ellen and Todd are
Alan
missing.
and Todd are missing, okay. Let the record reflect that Alan is here.
Thank you.
And then Christina is here on behalf of Todd.
Okay. All right, any requests, we do have a quorum, right? Any requests for excused absence? Given the state of our nation right now.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, pledge of allegiance, so you can please stand. Place your right hand over your heart, and begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Let's see, Kyle, do we need to approve the agenda?
No.
Okay. Conflict of interest disclosures? No? All right. Public comment, so we have no one in the public. Comment, do I still read that?
Yeah.
All right. Any one person may address the committee on any matter not on this agenda. If you wish to speak, please fill out a public comment form provided at the back of the table and give the committee chair or secretary. There's a 3-minute limit on public comments. There will be no sharing or passing of time to another person. State law prohibits the committee from discussing or taking actions brought up by your comments. So, first item for today is the approval of the minutes. Was everyone able to review minutes?
Well, first we need to see if there's any public speakers.
Oh,
Yeah,
Just
we're
just
so
for the
full.
record.
are there any public speakers?
No.
None.
Moving on.
Seeing none? Approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Motion approved. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Updates of projects from city staff.
Thank you, committee chair, members of the committee. So we have a couple things going on in the city, but before I get to that, you'll notice that on the roll call, barring some of the issues we had in terms of the names not being listed, I apologize for that. We'll get that rectified for the next meeting, including putting Rob's name on there as well, because I noticed his name is omitted from the list. So he's still on here, he just wasn't able to make it. But you'll notice that Kimberly's name is not on there and that we have a vacancy. So she was reassigned to start attending certain executive meetings from the United Way that directly conflict with this meeting date and time. So, due to that conflict, she had to resign, and City Council has opened up a vacancy for the committee itself, and that's for a Beaumont business community or business member. So that's what we're going to be looking for. Much like Mr. Ahmed, you don't have to live in the city, but you do need to own a business somewhere else. I mean, a business in the city, or if you live in the city and own a business elsewhere, that will work. Kimberly didn't own United Way, but she lived in the city, so she was a representative, a high-level representative of a larger organization, so that's how she fulfilled that role previously. So if you know anyone that may be interested in joining us and collaborating with everyone in the group, please send them my way and I'll get them to the application on our city website. And I think the vacancy is open until filled, so there's not like a firm deadline, but know that when we get a decent amount of applications in, we will be reviewing those and then presenting those to city council for action. So with that said, we'll move on to actual project reports. The treatment plant itself is something that we always kind of keep the committee up to date on. It's going very well, even though we have some rain going on this week, but overall the treatment plant is on schedule, and we're hoping that the facility is fully operational, the brine line's connected to San Bernardino by, I probably want to say August or September of this year. It might be earlier, but that's kind of our deadline from the state in terms of getting it in operation. Perturo interchange is done, you can drive on it, and we're currently designing and looking for funding opportunities for phase 2. We're planning on going and meeting with a couple people up in Sacramento next month, and I think that's one of the priority packages that we have for transportation funding is the additional ramps there. We may even be taking a trip to Washington DC and looking for additional funding there to make up the gap from what we have currently. I know that from a regional perspective, we have around 5 to 6 million or so off the top of my head from the regional transportation agency that is kicking into that project, but 5 million doesn't get us to the 35, 40 million that we need for the entire project. So it's definitely helpful, but it's not enough to get us to construction. So we're gonna be looking for other funding sources. San Gorgonio Village is going very well out there. So you see a lot of the different buildings going vertical, which is exciting. Some of the ones that aren't going vertical, that's doing their underground, is I think the In and Out and the Cinema West building, so the theater. And most of those buildings are actually occupied by a tenant already. So we're not building vacant building and then having to attract tenants. Much of that attraction has kind of been done over the last year and a half. And all those buildings are being tailored to the individual users that are going to be going in there. And then there's a lot of work going on at the Sundance Corporate Center. So if you can remember, quite some time ago, I told you all about this fun, exciting project. At least I think it's fun and exciting. Christina probably does too. But we enjoy things like that. But it's a fun and exciting project for us because it's some of the nicest, what I would call Class A offices within the region. For years and years, most of the Class A offices were done over where Tim Laura worked, over in Riverside, right? You see those types of buildings being built over there, but you don't see them within this region. So it's exciting to have this medical facility and medical plaza really opening, and then we're working along with the landowner to try to attract those other ancillary service businesses, retail businesses on the frontages where there's a couple extra buildings or some inline suites that are available. So that's fun for us. If you don't know it, the city has kicked off its budget process, so that's a fun and exciting time for all the different departments here at City Hall. If that interests you, know that City Council is going to be getting updates almost on the regular at each City Council meeting, so you can kind of watch them go through the process of the annual budget for fiscal year 2021 and get an idea of what's going to be a priority. You can get an idea of the funding that we have coming in and our projected funding sources that I think Todd and I have talked about a couple times before. But you'll see that as a component of the budget, which goes along with the revenues, the expenditures. So if that interests you, know it's coming up. And then I was going to talk about Innovation Month, which is in April, and that's Riverside County Innovation Month, and that's something that the city has, the past at least 3 years, partnered with Riverside County in almost every city in Riverside County in order to demonstrate and showcase the different levels of innovation that actually occurs in Riverside County that we don't necessarily get credit for. We have some major universities and community colleges within the region that are doing some groundbreaking research and institutional learning. But a lot of times if you talk to someone from outside the Inland Empire about Riverside County, they don't think we have startup businesses here. They don't think we have tech jobs. And we do. We have a lot of them. It's just we're not very good about telling that story. And for the last couple of years, the county has led the charge on changing that. So typically we partner with the county. We have local events to demonstrate the innovation that's going on in each community. And then the other fun one is that they have those fast pitch competitions. You guys ever watch Shark Tank on TV? I always watch that. But they have those for local people, and there's 4 of them that occur. And these new startup businesses and entrepreneurs pitch their new company or new technology, and therefore, and then the finalists of each of those regionals go to the finale. And then they're awarded, I think last year was $10,000 to the winner. Doesn't seem like a lot of money to someone like that, but if it gets you a new MacBook Pro or you're able to pay rent for a couple months at a new facility, it definitely helps. So with all that said, Innovation Month as of like an hour ago, I've learned is potentially being pushed back until October. Which is okay. I guess we can be innovative no matter what month we choose. But with the different discussions that are occurring based on the coronavirus, and then having people congregating in certain places or trying to avoid those types of things, some of the different communities are looking at postponing or canceling some of the Innovation Month events. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to learn this before I talked to you, Dr. Brown, earlier today, because we had solidified a really cool Innovation Month event at the school district for April. I may end up just having it anyway, and then we can always have another one in October, because I have 2 events. One's a networking meeting at the Craft Lounge, and then we had another one scheduled with Beaumont Unified to run through some of their innovative school settings. And I'll have to think about in the next week or so whether we still want to have that in April, because I don't think sending that message out a couple times a year is a bad thing. But
So who are those meetings open to? Students, business owners?
the ones we've done in the past is open to everyone. So like the Wolverine tour that we had was opened up to all members of the public, because I wanted people that lived in Beaumont to know what happened in that building instead of just driving by it every day. If you drive by it every day, you're like, man, that thing's a warehouse and it has a lot of shoes in it.
Yeah.
But you don't see the innovation, you don't see those workers' faces when you're just driving by, right? But if I get those people in that building, they see what's going on there, they see that has air conditioning, that's a nice place to work, and then when they go home, they tell all their friends, hey, I went to this facility, it's not a warehouse just filled with pallets. There's a lot of people in there, so that's what we're trying to do for these events. So if you ever want to come to any of these, by all means, you're all invited.
What about students though? Like what age group of kids? Or is that not something for kids?
It could be. I don't necessarily. Yeah, maybe not the Craft Lounge, because they have beer and they have an age restriction that has nothing to do with my event.
Right.
But
No, I'm just referring to like the innovation stuff that you guys are referring to for.
yeah, the Beaumont Unified thing, I know that Dr. Brown was going to look into how many people we can get in through the school for those types of tours, but I don't think yours would be limited in terms of age.
Yeah, no, we had discussed doing a tour of our career tech ed facilities and different programs. And so we do things throughout the year with other younger students where they come in and they're invited to our college and career fair that has all of that. Our 8th grade orientation was Monday, and so 8th graders got to come and see all of our CT programs. We do a CT showcase as well that night, so
there are different events where they get exposure to that. So
Mhm.
I think this was Kyle looking at kind of like what we did at the Wolverine tour. If you guys were there, it was really neat. It's just kind of a bunch of different community members who wanted to come in and see what was going on in the community.
Cool.
The other part of that too is some of those programs go down to the elementary schools and they advertise their what's going on so that the kids have exposure to it.
Good deal.
And just a comment on that too, Kyle, I would need to, in order to solidify that, I need to run that through all the proper channels
Sure.
and everything. Because with the COVID-19, there may be,
Yeah.
there's been talk about not having large events at the schools too.
Yeah, so maybe we'll discuss it. If we can pull it off, then that's fine. If we think it's better to postpone it, then obviously we'll do that.
Hey Kyle, I mean,
Yes.
let me interrupt you. Is it possible that we on the council, I've been there on the Wolverine, can we have a tour for this council? Who have been on the tour on that plant, I mean, on that warehouse? You guys, have you been there before? Wolverine?
Yeah, I have.
There's 3, including me. Yeah, have you been in there, Mike? That would be nice to, arrange exclusively for this. I should not say exclusively. I mean, that would be nice, everybody could see the operation in there. Just like what he said is the technology and everything. It's amazing inside. And then probably next step is the CJ. I mean, CJ is the CJ food. How they make all those Oriental, the dumplings and all those stuff. That'll be nice. I mean, to see the technology, not only where, how they process. No, I mean, how the technology, hands off and everything is all technology. And then if we could see that as a council, and then let's pass it to the students, and so we could intelligently communicate with them and tell them what's really going on those warehouses. That would be great. If we could do that, I mean, oh, sorry, I mean, I should be. So, yeah, I mean, if we could do arrangement on that, I mean, as soon as possible, I mean, so all of us could see that plant, that would be great. And then the future will be the Amazon. That'll be nice to have those 2 companies, that the CJ and the Wolverine, and then we jump into Amazon probably a few months from now. And
Yeah.
we could arrange that.
I can definitely set that up. Is there any days that just absolutely doesn't work for anyone? I know that Dr. Brown and I are really bad on Tuesdays, right? So we're gonna stay away from Tuesdays. But does anyone else have any days that?
How soon are you thinking?
I'll reach out to him tomorrow and then see what's going on. So maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks or something like that.
And Mondays are also bad for me.
Okay. So let's do a survey right now. Why don't we do a survey right now? I mean,
You've already been,
I'll
so-
make it Tuesday to Thursday. How's
Kyle
that?
already said Tuesdays are bad.
Tuesday is bad.
So let's-
Monday's bad. So we got, Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so let me reach out to them. A lot of times when we go through there, I respect their business operation. So some days they're gonna be inundated with a ton of in volume or out volume. So I try to stay away from that because Matt doesn't have people that are just running tours all the time. So really he's stepping out of his managerial role or his supervisor roles to put on the tours. So I'm gonna try to coordinate with him on a day where he thinks it may be slow. I think Monday is a bad day for them because they get all the internet orders, so that's good as well. So everyone that orders from like Friday when they close to Monday morning, it all hits the system on Monday morning. So if you ever want to see a lot of e-commerce orders go out, Monday's the day, but he may not want us to come that
Yeah.
day.
So
But
Wednesday or
I'll check it
Thursday.
out, and
Yeah.
then once I get a date solidified with them, I'll definitely shoot that out to all the committee members, and then I'll ask you to RSVP to that, so that I know that we're gonna have people in attendance, because I don't wanna bug him and then have me show up for the umpteenth time. But thank you, good idea.
Oh, thank you, Carl.
So
Really
that's,
neat experience.
Yeah. That'll be nice.
that concludes my report. Unless you guys have any questions. All right, thank you.
All right, affordable housing update. Do we have any information on that? We had brought it up at the
You have
last.
a full presentation with 30 slides.
No, we don't.
Get your donuts.
No, right. I'm saving that for council.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Christina Taylor, Community Development Director. I have just a couple things I thought I would provide for you guys today. The first one has to do with RHNA, which is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Some of you may be familiar with that acronym. Some of you may have heard that terminology before. I'll wait for the handouts to get around so then you can see what we're talking about. There's extra in case any public shows up. So, RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, is a process that the state of California mandates that each metropolitan area goes through every 6 or 7 years, which is they refer to it as a cycle. So we're currently in the 5th cycle, coming to the close of the 5th cycle of RHNA, getting ready to go through the process for the 6th cycle. So over the past year and a half, SCAG, which is the Southern California Association of Governments, to which Riverside and San Bernardino counties belong, as well as Orange County, Los Angeles County. I think maybe they go up through Ventura County. All belong to this big MPO, basically a metropolitan planning organization. SCAG handles the coordination of the RHNA, or the Housing Needs Assessment, for our region. And so basically, the short version is we have to look at how many houses were built all throughout the region and every jurisdiction. And then the state of California, in all of their illustrious wisdom, tells us how many that they think we're going to need for the next cycle. And then through some very complicated formula, which I can direct you to on the website if anybody's interested, they determine what each city's share of that housing need will be. So when we started this process, SCAG was anticipating that our region, our multiple county regions, need for housing during the 6th cycle would be somewhere between 600,000 and 700,000. And so, but split over, not just Beaumont, I mean, split over, 5, 6, 7 counties that participate. You divide that up and you think LA obviously is going to have a certain share. Riverside and Corona and those bigger cities are going to have a larger share than, in theory, some of us other smaller cities, right? Well, we go through this process and SCAG staff is putting together all these variations of how we think the housing needs should be split up among all of our counties here that belong to the SCAG region. The same process is happening in Central California, in the Bay Area, down in San Diego at Sandag. Every region in the state is doing the same thing, their own version of the same thing. Well, we were thinking we're going to only have this, little over 500,000 need, and we'll get to split that up. And, everybody was kind of like, okay, that's not too bad. State of California comes down and says, oh no, your regional need is 1.3 million houses over the next, 6 to 7 years. So that's where you see on your chart here at the top where it says total regional housing need. That's the number that will be divided among all of the cities in the SCAG region. All the LA County cities, Orange County cities, Riverside, San Bernardino County cities. I believe, like I said, Ventura, I don't think Imperial County is ours, but there's quite a few. So anyway, we started out with 3 formulas, and 2 of those worked out pretty well from the city of Beaumont standpoint as far as what our number would be. Both of them yielded a number smaller than what our current cycle numbers are. And then one of them was much higher and we weren't in favor of that. So we weighed in as the city council gave direction. We provided a letter saying we think this methodology works. Well, there are a bunch of cities that didn't like any of the methodologies because they were, our number was like 4,000 or 5,000. There were cities, and like the county of Riverside, I think their number was like 12,000, right? I mean, so some of the cities were getting really hammered with the amount of housing production they were going to have to plan for over the next cycle. So SCAG went back and says, you know what, state of California, first of all, we don't agree with these numbers, which we didn't win that battle, unfortunately. The state said, no, this is the number, the 1.3 million. And so then we weighed in and says, there are other things that need to be considered. It's not just growth. It's job centers. It's high-quality transportation, access to high-quality transportation. It's a lot of other things that the state is wanting cities to focus on, like reducing vehicle miles traveled, which, helps with air pollution and congestion on the roads and other things like that. And so we think that now we need to reevaluate the methodology. And so SCAG staff did a good job of coming up with a different methodology that basically took into consideration where the jobs are, right? So here in Beaumont, we have a lot of jobs, but we still have a lot of population that commutes out. And so for a city like us, we don't have any what is considered a high quality transit. Like we don't have a train station, we don't have a big transit hub or anything like that. So, we don't have anything that would be considered high quality transit. We don't have any major job centers yet, like many of our other neighboring cities do. So the formulas were recalculated, and the formula that was decided upon is now what you see on your sheet here. Took into account, if you look in the box that says Beaumont City Statistics, you see there's a forecasted housing growth, and then it shows some different data points in there, and then it shows our share of the region's HQTA, which is about 3/4 of the way down. That's 0%. That's high quality transit, right? So a lot of, and this kind of dovetails into the housing legislation and changes in housing that we're seeing right now. The state is really pushing for cities with high quality transit, access to train stations and bus transit centers, to increase the density of housing that's allowed around those areas. Again, with the idea that people will ride the bus or the train instead of drive. And so we want to encourage housing development there so people can ride the transit to work, right? That's what the state is thinking should happen. So anyway, because we don't have the high quality transit and we don't have a whole lot of, if you see percentage of regional jobs accessible within 30 minutes, that's a very low percentage. Share of region's job accessibility, 0.08%. So these are all very low numbers because we're a very rural, suburban type community, right? Just in the scheme of the cities around us, we are just starting to really grow and boom. So anyway, that all factored in. So if you look at the next column, you see the RENA allocation. So the forecasted housing growth for the city is just almost 3,700 units over the next 6 or 7 years. And honestly, that's about what we have entitled currently, which means approved, that could be built in this city. So it's probably fairly on target with what we could sustain based on what we know at this point. There's some replacement need, and that replacement need number just basically means at some point we demoed or lost some houses, to something else, and so those are the number over the last 10 years of houses or apartments or old dilapidated buildings or anything that was considered residential that would need to be replaced. And then we have a little bit in there for existing need, and so that gives us our total new number for the upcoming cycle, which is 4,129. And from a planning standpoint, compared to what I've seen some of our other cities and some of what my counterparts are having to deal with, not a bad number for us, considering what we already have entitled, right? It's also lower than what we had for this cycle. Our number was over 5,000 homes for the fifth cycle that we're coming out of. So in the scheme of things, it could be a lot worse. Do we necessarily agree with the whole intent and the way the state is going about things? maybe not entirely, but from the work that's been done up to this point, it's not a bad number either for us. Like I said, some of the other cities, 7, 8, 10, 12,000 homes that they're going to have to plan for over the course of the next 6 or 7 years. So anyways, it comes to affordable housing. Below that total, you see a breakdown of what the state of California says that our dispersion of houses among income levels should look like. So City of Beaumont, very strong in, moderate and above as far as housing goes, right? So all of the homes that have been built here in Sundance and in Fairway Canyon Golf Course area, even the Four Seasons and, all of those that are being built currently, based on what the state threshold established, those are all above moderate, considered above moderate level homes, which is probably pretty correct if you look at the home prices, right? So we have a pretty high level of projected need for very low income housing as far as what the state would like to see. Now that can be either apartments or houses, it can be deed restricted, it can be age restricted, it can be any of those things. But to meet the threshold for the very low income housing, that means we would have to have it specifically called out as no one above a certain income level can live in these homes. And so we're able to plan for those. We're able to do that in either single or multifamily neighborhoods. We have a lot of tools that you'll see in the next couple months coming out through the general plan update that will help the city achieve that in a way that will still be harmonious with what's continuing to go on in the city. Then we have some low income, and that works the same. So very low and low, the only difference there is an income threshold. So and those are adjusted every year or two, and that's set by the federal government. And then we have moderate and above moderate income, and I was very happy to see that our projected need for above moderate income homes was 1,500. So that's great. That means people with pretty solid incomes are projected to move out to the city here. So it's a pretty balanced look at the types of housing that we'd have. Even moderate income is pretty good. Those would not necessarily need to be deed restricted or anything. It's just going to be above that income level. So, and a lot of times the housing prices, the for sale products, the price point takes care of that on its own because you have to make a certain amount of money to be able to afford that price point. So anyway, this is likely what will be adopted or something very, very similar to this in the next couple of months. And then the city will, soon planning department is preparing to put out an RFP for updating the city's housing element. So once this is done, then the state of California says, okay, cities, you have to update your housing element for the 6th cycle. We're done with the 5th cycle stuff, let's update. So we update the current housing element, prepare a new housing element, and it will include planning factors that will help us achieve these numbers that the state is saying we need to plan for. That has to be done and approved by October 2021. So, and it takes about a year, maybe a little more, to get that done. So that will be kicking off pretty quickly here. Anyway, so this is, you won't see this all the time. You see this probably about every 5 or 6 years this comes up. And that's how the cycles work. There is a great, if anyone would like the information, I can have Kyle send it out to you on the SCAG website. There's a tool that it looks like this spreadsheet when you open it up, but here where it says Beaumont City, you can actually click on the drop down and select any city that's in the whole SCAG region and see what their data looks like. So it's a really great tool for comparative value if you're at all interested in seeing what either of our neighboring cities are doing or just what some of the bigger cities are getting hit with, like Corona, Temecula, Riverside. Different dynamic, different type of city demographics, different jobs, different transit options, and it will show you the breakdown of, what they're looking to have too. So it's a pretty good, or I should say it's pretty interesting to be able to go on and compare and see what others are going to have to plan for as well. I'm happy to take any questions on this before if I have time to do a little bit more on something else. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we did all of this, and this is what is it the state that is dictating?
Yes.
And funds are allocated?
It's a great question.
What's the whole purpose of?
So right now, there have not been there have not been up to this point consequences, and for this legislative year, as we know it, there are not yet consequences. What we heard and what was a little bit actually scary for a lot of cities, last legislative cycle, there was or actually it was the governor's budget year, if I'm sorry, I misstated, not legislative cycle, the budget cycle. The governor was having some discussions on possibly linking some of the transportation dollars that the cities receive based on the progress we make towards building these houses. That was very upsetting to a lot of cities because not every city has the ability to make this happen. Redevelopment doesn't exist anymore as it used to. We don't have a lot of the tools, and honestly, we can't force a developer to build here, right? So that really is what it comes down to. So I think there was a lot of feedback from both small and large cities to the governor's office that there was not a lot of support for this. And so that was, tabled and was not connected to the budget. I have not heard for this upcoming budget year that they're looking at linking that. Like Kyle said, I believe we'll be going to Sacramento to meet with some of our legislative representatives in a few weeks. And at that time, we'll probably have a much better gauge on whether or not there will be any trailer bills that will try and accomplish that, or if we can look at seeing that in the next couple of years. So right now, no, there's no consequences. The state does monitor. So I prepare a report every year, council adopts, and we send off to the state, and it's called an annual progress report. And that shows the progress that's been made towards achieving the general plan goals and policies, as well as, in particular, these housing goals and policies. So I've done 2 or 3 since I've been here, and I'm working on the one for 2019. And we do make progress, which is great. Don't make a ton of progress on the low mod, although we've had the veterans housing that's open now. And then this last year, were able to entitle a lower income apartment complex by one of the same developers that did the veterans housing. They haven't broken ground or built it yet, but we're able to show that, okay, we approved 40-something units towards this, and the state says, okay, that's progress, right? So we do report, and that is relatively new. Those reports just started in 2018 for the 2017 year. So we're still relatively new in that process. So right now, no consequences as of yet, but it's not off the table because it has recently been discussed.
I have a question about, and this might be a broader question that I'll.
Let's go. Let's try it.
So you hear all these reports about the state in declining population, and cities are in declining population, school districts are in declining enrollment, all those different things. So I'm just curious how the state is determining we have to build more houses, but yet we're losing more people.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have not been in a city or an area in the last 5 or 6 years that's declining. So I don't know if maybe people are leaving LA and San Francisco and coming out to the Inland Empire. I know we do have a lot of migration out from the urban areas out to our areas. That is a question that comes up. If we have all these people leaving, how do we still have a housing shortage or something like that? But with 40 million people in this state, there's still a demand. And I think a lot of it has to do with, this is my own personal opinion, not the reflection of anyone else, but after having dealt with this for a number of years now, I think a lot of it is the dynamic in that we have a lot of multi-generational households. And so when we look at that, or when the state looks at that, I think they take those numbers and use that to sort of expand the need, whether it's a living situation by choice or whether it's a living situation because of financial need or other situation. I think some of that factors in. Could I point to any methodology in the state reports that says that? No, I couldn't. But in my experience having been in planning for nearly 20 years now, that I think that's a lot that factors into the how we calculate the need.
That was my other question, was with multiple, families doubling and tripling up,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
that trend continues because of the cost of housing.
Part of it is cost, and part of it is cultural. Like, you know, my mom is Puerto Rican, her whole side of the family, and so my grandma's aged, and she lives with my mom now because that's what happened when my mom was little and her grandma was older, and they lived with them. You know, so some of it is relative to, I think, what a cultural preference is, but I think a lot of it is financial constraint too, especially because we just have expensive real estate.
Yeah. I think another thing to keep in mind when you look at this process and how it plays into the state of California is you are correct. There are certain people that are leaving. We have other people coming in. The state also has an affordability issue, and where people that are growing up, younger people, right? They're getting out of high school. They're entering the workforce. They're not able to afford a house, or rent is extremely high. And adding more supply to the housing stock within communities is essential to stop that artificial inflation, because communities are building zero houses. So you'll see that certain communities that have historically not built anything are being allocated thousands of units. Now here it's a different dynamic because we have a pro-business city council, pro-growth in terms of what types of housing are going in. We're okay with that. It's nice housing that's going in. It's not some substandard development. But you have other cities that want zero houses built, right? And then their house price for the same thing that one of our developers is building today is $800,000. Well, how is a young person or a young family ever going to afford that? They can't. So then they move. So maybe part of it is by creating additional housing throughout the state of California, especially in areas that have not built anything in years. Maybe we stop that mass exodus within certain generations from leaving the state. Or, I mean, if they want to come here, that's fine, but a lot of them aren't coming here. They're moving to different areas of the United States. So that's my own sidebar, sorry.
How does it work for the low-income housing? Like, is an area designated to be taken over? Is there somewhere that the city says we're going to build this portion of those 1,205 houses?
Sure. So low-income housing can occur in a variety of ways. So we can see low-income single-family housing. We can see low-income multifamily housing. It can be for-sale product. It can be a rental product. The key with low income is that it's deed restricted. So in order to qualify for low income housing, the deed actually would say restricted income level, you know, whatever that meets the federal guidelines. And then on the buyer's end, it works however it works with the financing and whatnot. So a developer could, so there's something called inclusionary housing. We actually don't have that here in Beaumont, but what inclusionary housing policies do is they state for every so many number of, you know, market rate houses you build, you've got to build a certain percentage of below market rate, right? And so that helps cities that have an issue getting some of that lower income housing, you know, achieve that. It's pretty popular. A lot of cities do it. Like I said, we haven't adopted anything like that here. At some point, it may become a discussion. I work at direction of council, so, you know, we'll see if that ends up coming my way or not. With multifamily housing, so we do not say low income can only go here. Multifamily housing is multifamily housing. So if it's apartments or condos or townhouses, whatever it is, works the same way. If it's a rental product, a certain number of the houses will be, you know, or a certain number of the units would be restricted to a certain income level, and then whoever builds and runs that development then complies with whatever the federal and state guidelines are for making sure that the occupants meet that requirement. It can be a whole development, a whole complex that's totally of a certain variety of income levels. It can be mixed in. You can have, just like with single family, you can have multifamily. It has a certain number of market rate apartments and a certain number of other apartments mixed in. Our design criteria and our development standards are the same regardless. So when you drive by a building, you wouldn't necessarily know that it was a lower income or a market rate just by looking at it. The only difference right now is we have a density bonus. So for every, and this is mandated by the state and it's in our municipal code, depending on the type of project a developer would come build, If it meets certain income thresholds for a certain number of units, there is a density bonus or an increase in number of units that they're allowed to get for certain thresholds. There's also a reduction in parking depending on the proximity to transit or bus stop or something like that. So those would be the two differences that you would see in market rate versus income restricted types of development. So with single family, it is, it complies with regular single family development standards. But for multifamily, we have those tools that the state, I would say the state allows us to utilize, or the state has said that we get to utilize for people who propose a project that fit those criteria.
Christine, so the numbers is based on average household size, right? It's average, what is the size of an average household?
So depends where you go. So, and this is not based on average household size. So it's not number of people per household. That's not factored into this. It's just projected household growth, number of households. So whether that was 2 people in a household or 5 people in a household, that's not necessarily factored into this criteria. Now, the income levels are factored in. So if you're a 2-person household, that income threshold is going to be different than if you're a 4-person household. So those do get adjusted, and again, that's a federal formula that applies to that. Thanks. Okay.
Can I interject in there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Very good. This will be boring. I mean, on my side. Because this is all numbers. I mean, on the, I really appreciate that. I mean, that's excellent. I mean, excellent explanations and everything. I do part of the SCAG on the original, on the PIP cycle was, to be exact number, is 6,200. When we did the 6th cycle last November, and there was 6,200 that are allocated in Beaumont alone on that. I mean, and then we presented another formula, just like what you said, and then we recalculated that, and it favored us down to 4,100. And instead of working on the 6,200, now down to 4,100. The way I see it is more achievable for us. I mean, to have that, and then the cycle period on that is 8 years. The cycle is 8 years. So you have to divide that by the 4,100 by 8 years. That's how much we be allocated every single year to achieve that on that allocation. He's right. I mean, this is allocated on the close to transit. I mean, major transit. I mean, like the train, the hub, and everything. And this was introduced to us back in November by Russ Bailey in Riverside, and we did that. We did an excellent job on that. Now, giving you another boring thing. I mean, now we passed it last March on this, March 6th, last week. We did adopted this. We adopted this. So this is but the problem is just like she mentioned, Orange County, Cerritos is suing the SCAG because they have a bigger allocation on that. But Eric Garcetti said that hey, we are only 40,000 now. We're jumped to almost 50,000 homes that allocated them, and they will adopt it. And they're not fighting for it and everything. Give you another example to extreme is the Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills, allocated for 900 homes on that. But now, because of this new allocation, it jumped to 3,000 homes that to build. Do they complain? No. Because they know they have a job within the surroundings on the area. So they're okay on that, but the Orange County is suing the SCAG. So there will be, but it has been adopted, and SCAG staff, I would say, they did excellent job.
I concur. It was a lot of work, a lot
A
of heavy
lot of
lifting
work, man. I
for
mean,
them, and a lot of those statistical experts and mathematicians they have working there that deal with specific demographic data, and it really is an intense undertaking.
Yes,
So.
you're right.
I have
Yes.
a question. You're saying annually. Are you saying that Beaumont's allocation is 4,100 new units
For 8
per
years.
house? I mean, per year?
No,
For
for 8
8
years
years.
total.
Oh, for 8.
For 8
So-
years.
4,100 total over an 8-year period?
Yes.
You divide that by 8.
Okay.
Right.
8 years.
So what happens when we make that number hypothetically, 2 years from now,
Right.
we've now done 4,100?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean for the next 6 years, we're gonna be left alone?
Well, we're left
Or will
alone.
they
We're
reallocate?
left alone. No, there's no reallocation until the next cycle. So this number, once the state blesses SCAG's methodology and this table essentially for all the cities, then that number is what it is from October 2021 through October 2029, right? This is our number. I actually can't think of a city offhand that's ever actually built all their RENA numbers. Do you know of one? No,
What kind of development do we have on the west side of town?
So west side, we have Sunny Cal Egg Ranch, well, the old Sunny Cal Egg Ranch that would be homes. And there's not quite 600 homes that could be built there. We have Fairway Canyon, but here's what I'll tell you. These homes are, what they're referring to are homes above and beyond that we have to plan for. So in addition to so the homes that, like Sunny Cal's already entitled, and that was entitled during this current housing cycle. Fairway Canyons, those are already counted. Olive Woods, those are already counted, because those things have already been entitled. So the state is saying you need to plan for 4,129 houses more new that will come in. So, and again, we'll know for sure once we kick off the new housing element update, but I believe with some of the tools that we're putting into the new general plan update, I believe that the city will be able to accomplish that. I don't think we'll have a problem planning. The real question is if the state decides they're going to penalize cities for not achieving their total number, then we might see a problem, because again, this is private developer driven. It's not necessarily city projects. We don't have a housing authority. We're not going to come in and build and run housing developments.
Without penalty, all kidding aside, where's the incentive?
Most cities like rooftops because rooftops bring businesses. So cities do have incentive to build houses. Had not Beaumont approved a lot of the housing developments that were approved back when and being built now, we wouldn't have San Gorgonio Village or the movie theater. So it's a balancing act, and it's a combination of efforts between council goals and policies and planning efforts and economic development and public works and infrastructure projects, and all of those things work together to sort of make a whole city. So, again, not necessarily incentive per se, but there are, non-tangible, non-monetary benefits that come with having new housing developments.
Yeah, I completely agree with Christina, and there's the other aspect that there's some public administrators that think that following the guidelines and the needs assessment is the right thing to do for your city or the region, right? Where you have others, and I'm not gonna name names, that just aren't in favor of that. They'll look at their 2,000 or 5,000 RENA number and be like, I'm not gonna plan for anything. And that's their own way of managing that city, and that's not what we've done here. I personally don't think that's the right thing to do when the state is saying these people need houses, they need affordable housing. To just completely ignore that, I don't think is really fair to the community, regardless of if there's a penalty or not.
So I'll tell you.
Don't misinterpret my question. I'm not saying I
It's a
support-
great question.
Yeah, I'm not saying I support doing nothing.
Can I?
So I asked that actually because we had to start doing these annual progress reports that had never been required of planning departments before to report on housing elements. I'm like, well, what happens if we don't do it? Or what happens if it's late? And they're, well, you're kind of on like the naughty list, but there's no real like hard penalty.
Can I interject something? on the, on the housing, it's units. Actually, they go by units. I mean, condominiums and other units, that's the way they calculate it on that. So also now on the penalty, 2 years ago, or when they introduced this, 3 years ago, there's a penalty from 10,000 to 100,000 a month if you don't perform. So the governors dropped that on a year ago. So still lingering on the system, but he dropped it.
Yeah, that's the penalty that was
The penalty.
originally being considered, that's now not in place. So again,
That's correct.
we
It's
may
right.
see that again, because this governor is very adamant about housing production, as I'm sure you've all heard from just watching the general news. So we could see that again. But yeah, the goal is to be compliant. And I'll give you a good example of why we do want to be compliant and submit our housing report. So there was some grant funding available for planning projects and doing some planning documents to help facilitate. And one of the requirements was you did have to have a submitted annual progress report, right? Showing your, so I was like, well, okay, cool, we did it. And so I wrote the grant and we got $160,000 for planning.
There's an incentive.
So there's the incentive, right? Now, that's not always in place. This is with the new administration, some of the new legislation, but it is a good incentive, and that money can be put towards doing additional planning documents to help facilitate things from either a policy standpoint or technology standpoint, or incentivizing or working with, home builders or developers to try and, encourage housing growth. So the state is trying to be a little bit reasonable and give at least cities some of the tools and resources they need to help put things in place. But it's a much different dynamic than it was even 3 or 4 years ago.
Can I add on one, on the other questions you have? On the information I got, it's statistically, you're right on that, Dr. Brown, on the, there's a lot of, people moving out of the state, from 100,000 to 200,000 hearing right now till last year on that, but there's a lot of migration coming in, not immigration, it's migration from other states. So there's a compensation on that. That's why, the SCAG and also the state of California is watching it so closely on that because of the, the impact on employment and all those stuff that we have to, to deal with. So, you're right on that, but there's net effect on that, probably not even on the 20,000 on that. That's what the report came out on last January on that, yeah. Thank you.
I was going to talk about some legislation, but I know it's getting late on in the day. So I'm working on preparing a legislative update for council. And so it'll be available on one of the future agendas there in the next meeting or two. And I'm happy to come back anytime you guys wish, or maybe after I give the presentation to council, to come back and give you guys an update on some of the things that we'll see. And I'll just look for Kyle's nod on that.
Here we go. It's because we're real. We're talking. I know. We're talking about housing in here because that's my baby, man. Now is the they call it SB 50. That's what's been killed. Killed on the legislature in there. What is that? They could come in and then really tell us what to do, build more. So we're going to lose our control, the internal control, the local control. Now, that's, Senate Winner, authored that. Now he's gone, but there's a, probably you could check this out, the SB 902 is coming in. What is that? We have to be aware what's the 102 and the 902, let me correct that, the SB 902, and that's dangerous, on our city, because they will allow any, homeowner to build or convert their units from duplex to fourplex. So without us controlling that, so that's coming out on probably within a month, and that's being introduced right now by Senator Wiener on that. So I want that to be part of the thank you. So I just like to share with you guys. I mean, because this part of the economic development, because there will be a lot of if and not to do the conversion, because somebody could an old building or even on the gated community, they could convert that to duplex to fourplex, and we will lose control on that. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Christina.
Thank you, Christina. Good job.
So, we're on to the topics for future agendas. Are there any of those topics that we want to move up for, future, or do we want to do a follow-up on the affordable housing with the legislative component of that?
That would be my suggestion, is to, because Christina's gonna be working hard on affordable housing and the different legislation that they're proposing, especially Senate Bill 902 that the mayor had alluded to, and a slew of other ones, including impact fees. So I don't know if the school district's aware of it, but I'm sure you are, but I think there was 10 bills that are being proposed that have some level of impact on impact fees, some positive, some most negative, from at least a government agency's perspective. So I think we could put that in as a placeholder for the April meeting, and then if we're not up to that, then we'll go ahead and backfill that with another topic.
Sounds good. Ready for individual reports? So we'll start with Mr. Collins.
Not at this time, thank you.
I just want to say my daughter went on a field trip with Tournament Hills Elementary, and they went to the hockey arena down at Honda Center, and there was a STEM presentation there, I guess, and all the kids, like for my daughter, with what we deal with in the trades, she should have known about it. Like, she listens, I talk about it often, I tell her, but then my point in bringing it up to the group is that it hit home for her, because when she actually saw some of the things that they did, that's why I was asking the questions about what's available to these kids, because then she came home and she was like, oh, we did this cool little thing, and I was telling my wife and my daughter about how some of the STEM students that come to our career days and our boot camps, like, those kids are sharp. Like, they're what I remember a college graduate to seem like when I graduated in '97. Like, those kids in high school that are coming out of the STEM classes and stuff are. So I mean, just talk to your relatives and the youth that are around you, and tell them to get involved in those STEM classes so that they can take advantage of it.
And I have to say, we hear it all the time. Well, where's vocational education? And we tell them, we have vocational education. It's just called something different. We call it career technical education. And it's threaded throughout the community colleges and the high schools, and it's super technical, very hands-on, heavily based in high skill, high wage occupations. And kids are getting a lot of really neat stuff right now that they can go out and make $50-$60 an hour entry level.
And I see them both. I see the kids that come that didn't apply themselves,
Right.
and they can barely fill out an application. And I see these kids that come and they're part of the STEM group, and I would imagine they'll make more money than me in 3 years.
Right.
They're sharp. Like, I'm jealous, so spread the word.
Member Lawson.
Just very quickly, we had completed a meeting this afternoon wherein our faculty, our professor, and our leadership adopted a plan to address the coronavirus. We have been blessed in that we haven't had one single case on any of our 4 campuses. We were concerned about Marietta Valley, that they had closed their USD. They came back negative, and so we're very happy about that. That said, our first priority is always the safety of the students that we serve, and some of which you probably know in this community. And so we want to assure you, and I just finished a meeting with our Vice President, that we have an active plan in place. We will begin on Monday asking for volunteers from our professorate to move classes online, and we will have the capability of moving the majority of our classes online, following the example of some of our 4 years as well as some of the other community colleges who have begun that process. So we want to assure this community and assure our surrounding communities that your students that are attending Mount San Jacinto will continue to be safe, and will take every precaution to assure that they're able to pursue their education in a safe environment. So we want that message clearly sent out.
Mrs. Gogan?
I don't have any comments.
Nothing? And it looks like you appear to have the winning streak on wearing your name tag.
Yes, I remember. Got it this time.
Only person in the room. So I just have a few updates from the school district. So same thing, COVID-19. We're actually on conference calls with the Department of Health, the Riverside University Health System, every day, daily, and we're getting constant updates from all the different partner agencies. And so we're doing the same thing, monitoring things as they come minute by minute. And so same thing, our number one priority, safety, and as we get more and more developments, that's how we're reacting and notifying staff and parents. We have many ways, just as Mount San Jacinto and other agencies, many ways to communicate, and through text messages and websites and all kinds of information. We're literally sending updates to staff on a daily basis. And with that, working with those partner agencies to make sure that what we're doing is safe and all those different things. So if there's ever an update from those partner agencies that there are cases and that there's a need for closure, we'll make sure that that's very, very clearly communicated massively throughout the community. As you may or may not know, Measure B, our school bond measure did not pass, but we did have one of the highest turnouts in history, I guess, in terms of an election, which is great. So we're looking at other ways to make sure that we maximize our dollars and meet the needs of our students. So there's no way to stop. We keep moving forward and find different ways and find creative ways to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students. And then finally, one last thing, and I have to be brief, is one of our schools participated, actually created a competition called the Amazing Shake. And what that is basically a kind of like a gauntlet of different activities and competitions where students had to interact with adults. And it came from a concept of how do you shake someone's hand? By looking them in the eye when speaking, and being, we call it Webby partners, getting your hand into somebody else's hand, that sort of thing. So things that people have talked about being soft skills, we're now calling essential skills. Those are the essential skills that businesses are looking for. Kids that can go out and communicate and stay away from their phones and get their head up and shake and introduce and all that stuff. So it was an amazing competition. Really demonstrated to a lot of people that our youth they continue to impress us on a daily basis, and it was really unique and really nice to see students who can speak and articulate with words and gestures and vocabulary that many adults don't do and can't do. So it was a great competition. If you ever get a chance to go on the San Gregorio Middle School's webpage, they have some information and some videos on their webpage. Really, really neat to see. We're looking at how we can grow this in the future. And that's all I have.
May I ask a question on your bond initiative? I think many of the local may have had bad timing with the state, right? So do the district plan on bringing it back in another election, or what's the?
There's been some conversation about that, but I don't know at this time. Yeah. All right, Member Reader.
Oh, okay. The chamber is still going to have its Good Morning Beaumont breakfast this Friday. Superintendent Terrence Davis is going to be our speaker, so hopefully you'll all come and hear him. He's always a great speaker. And we're under the 100-person threshold for the recommended threshold for number of people to attend. And just to let you know, I am still working on Business of the Month, and we'll get that off the ground shortly. Thank you.
Okay, quickly on my side, I mean, I would like to, congratulate, our staff. One is, Kyle, Ashley, and Todd putting together our first mayor's roundtable. That was a success, and Betty was there, and well, the company we have is the the Class Act. The owners over there, the Blue Sky, which is the printing, and then we got the Paraconi, which is Gary, it's over there, and then the CJ in there, and because of the success, and they we communicate with them, and then they express what they need, what we expect from them, and now we will have the second mayor's roundtable. And this will be expanded. I mean, more on mix, CEO, all the company owners in there. The most really objective on this, on my token, is to to have a one is to to hire our kids, especially in town, to have the apprenticeship, the interns. All this company, I mean, you might say again, as I mentioned before, look like a warehouse. No, the technology is in there. They need, now they need, on CJ alone, they almost 100 employees. They need this year another 100 employees. Coming up, the Amazon, and they need really a few thousand, 1,000 employees on this. I mean, again, it's not really warehouse. Because everything is robotic and everything on the Amazon. So will be a high paid, employees. If we could get our kids, I keep on saying kids, our students, to be apprentice on there or interns on that. That's my goal. I mean, get our kids to be employed and be part of this growth in Beaumont. Again, we need everybody's help on this. I mean, especially on the unified school. I mean, and also the Mount San Jacinto. We like to coordinate with you and then communicate with you, especially with Kyle, giving you what their requirements, and I like to have the first hand to give it to us before they go public, So again, I'm pro with the kids.
In regards to that, that was one thing we had discussed like a couple years ago about local area hire. Is like when businesses want to come into a region, and if the city has any ability to implement some type of local area hire provisions before they build, preference for veterans, local area
There you
hire
go.
for students,
Mhm.
But I mean, I think all that stuff has to be before the deal is signed, so that that way when we get to this point, they say, well, hey, you signed a deal that if you're going to build here, that you would hire or employ this many 18-year-olds within the region. I mean, I don't know if we could revisit the local area hire discussion, but I don't know how much more building is going to happen, how much more, but
Surprised.
You'll be surprised.
There's different ways.
That's right. I mean, I'm reaching out on some of the top people in there. I mean, I'm really communicating with Todd and Kyle on this, so to give us a more priority. I mean, we're behind the scene, but we're working towards that goal. On that, we don't need that kind of arrangement with them, but we're taking their words on this. Thank you.
Quickly, we are working on bus routes out to that area as well, just to try to get ahead of that. Elizabeth is working on that as we speak. Kyle did a great update. I do want to let you know on the Potrero Bridge, what we're trying to do right now is work with Caltrans to get the on and off ramps redesigned to cut the cost down, because right now they're looking at, what is it, 40? 30 to something like that. 40, 50? And we're trying to get that cost cut down by redesigning the on and off ramps so that we can get it done sooner, because funding is very difficult to get right now. Finance Committee has an opening as well, so keep an eye out for that. And I would also just suggest that you keep an eye out for budget. I believe we're supposed to have a workshop, aren't we, coming up? Or is, yeah? Those are interesting, because it's interesting to see how the city plans. We've got recessions that we plan for within the budget, so that we're not caught short or caught sleeping. So that they are interesting. We now have an accounting well, I don't think it's complete yet, but we do have an accounting group that is extremely bright and putting together a good budget for us. And to touch on what Dr. Brown had discussed, which was the amazing shake, it was truly amazing. It actually gave me hope for the future, just like you did when we first met you. There are a lot of other ones just like you coming up, so that's great to see. If you do hear of it, because they did look for professionals, business owners, things like that, to participate as judges, I'll do what I can to keep you apprised of the next one that comes. But I think we're still working to raise money to send our winner to the national, right? Is last I heard. So it was definitely something that my wife and I talked about for days after. Very impressive. That's all I have.
Yeah, without getting too far into the weed, how are you raising money and how much for sending to the national?
You know what? I will check with there's a Principal Drew, I think, is the one that's kind of heading that up.
Right. I think I saw it on the, yeah, we'll have to follow up with it.
I'll try to get that information to Kyle so he can get it out to everyone. But
It also chaperones or a chaperone.
Yeah.
There's registration fees and travel fees.
The reason I'm asking is, I mean, if it is like a closed fundraiser for the parents or it's open, others can help, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, they're looking else to any opportunity for raising funds that they can.
Great
I
opportunity
think
for local
Pericone
businesses to
is donated.
Yeah.
He sees if he's standing up for it, he's ready to.
Oh, okay.
She's ready.
Fantastic. If you want to give me the cash, I'll make sure that they get more.
We'll accept your.
I mean, so these are the ideas for local businesses to engage with the community
Yes,
in a
yes,
meaningful way.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's really.
And that event was, I think, just like you're talking about, is a way for businesses to see these kids and to engage with these kids. It was really awesome. But I'm sure Dr. Brown could put you in touch with the gentleman that's principal's collecting the money. I think it'd be great, because it is a national competition.
It is, yeah. It came out from the Ron Clark Academy, if you're familiar with that, but.
At the end of the list, my
Oh,
company
really?
will contribute.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
That would be the widest audience to receive.
Sure.
If she sends out, everybody gets it.
Sure.
It's a great idea.
And what I need, I mean, it's directly related to business. I mean, it's not about test scores. It's not about prepping kids or teaching kids lessons in English or math. It's really about how do you communicate with adults? How do you interview? How do you respond to difficult situations? Really neat event.
If you have a chance, watch the videos. It's not as inspiring as being there, but it definitely worth the.
Yeah, I mean, we were one of the judges in here. I am. I mean, Mike and Susie really spent the whole day with the students in there, and judging them. I came in there on the third period. They call it the third period, but that was really amazing. To participate on that, seeing the kids and everything, the poise, the eye contact, and the firmness and everything. It's amazing. I mean, I wish, I could share more on them. I mean, on the different culture, like, the Middle East, how they don't shake hands. I mean, that would be nice to have the body language on the Middle East. I mean, the Asian, how they bow, they shake hands, your hand and everything. The reason I'm bringing it out, I mean, the future is there, that they will encounter this kind of culture. and I like to share that to them on that. I mean, because I've been out there dealing with the other culture. I mean, the India from India, they have a different shake hands and don't shake hands and everything. So that would be nice to these students to learn that too. You know, thank you.
You've heard a lot from me today, so I'm not going to go into any other detail, but there is the Career Center here tomorrow from Mount San Jacinto Career College, or Community College. So we're going to have their career vehicle out on that parking lot in the morning, and the vehicle will be here for about 9 to noon, 9 to 1, 9 to 2, around that. So get here or send people on over if they're looking to spruce up their resume, work on interview skills, apply for jobs, apply for college, all those types of things. So we're excited about that. And then if you're looking for someone to volunteer for your amazing shake next year, you can throw me in the ringer.
There you go.
Love it. We will. Christina?
Yeah, us too. Yeah, I told
Yeah.
Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, I said, yeah, I would love to participate in that. If my staff can help out at all,
Okay.
let us know. Yeah, we'd love to. Yeah.
Great. All right. Do we need a motion to adjourn? No, we don't need a motion.
Sure
to
job.
adjourn, do we? All right. No other comments? We'll adjourn at 5:24.
All right.